when Europe was in the Dark Ages, Africa was writing books, not just stories, not just letters. Scientific texts, mathematics, astronomy, law, philosophy. Hidden in the sands of the Sahara, in the legendary city of Timbuktu, scholars preserved one of the greatest intellectual treasures in human history. And for centuries, the world ignored it. Timbuktu was not supposed to become famous. It began as a small trading post near the Niger River in the 12th century. But geography changed its destiny. It sat at the crossroads of the trans-Saharan trade routes, where gold, salt, ivory, and ideas moved between West Africa, North Africa, and the Middle East. By the 14th and 15th centuries, under the influence of the Mali Empire and later the Songhai Empire, Timbuktu transformed into something extraordinary. It became a city of scholars, a city of debate, a city of books. At the heart of this intellectual revolution stood the famous Sankore Madrasah. This was not a small religious school. It functioned like a major university, attracting thousands of students from across Africa and the Islamic world. At its height, Timbuktu may have had between 20,000 and 25,000 students. In a city of roughly 100,000 people, nearly a quarter of the population was engaged in learning, while parts of Europe were struggling through plague, instability, and fragmentation. Scholars in Timbuktu were debating theology, calculating planetary movements, and drafting complex legal codes. They were studying medicine, documenting historical events, and developing systems of governance rooted in scholarship and ethics. But the true treasure of Timbuktu was not its architecture. It was its manuscripts. Families preserved hundreds of thousands of handwritten texts, carefully copied and passed down through generations. These manuscripts covered astronomy, mapping the movement of stars and planets with surprising precision. They included medical writings that described surgical procedures and herbal treatments. They explored mathematics, including algebra and geometry. They detailed legal systems and judicial reasoning. They recorded West African history in rich written chronicles. Some texts even discussed ethical leadership and social responsibility. Centuries before similar ideas gained prominence in parts of Europe. This challenges one of the most persistent myths in global history, the idea that Africa had no written intellectual tradition. The reality is far more powerful. Timbuktu was writing history while others were rewriting it. In this city, books were considered more valuable than gold. Merchants crossing the Sahara did not only transport salt and precious metals. They carried texts. Scholars were respected like royalty. Families invested fortunes into building private libraries. Knowledge was not a side pursuit. It was central to society. This culture of learning was deliberate. It was sustained. It was respected. Then in 1591, Moroccan forces invaded the Songhai Empire. Political instability followed. Trade routes shifted. Over time, Timbuktu's global influence declined. But the manuscripts did not disappear. Families hid them in trunks, buried them in desert homes, stored them in secret chambers. For centuries, these documents sat quietly in the sand, protected by ordinary citizens who understood their value. Later, colonial narratives painted Africa as a continent without history. Without literacy, without scholarship, the libraries of Timbuktu were overlooked, minimized or ignored in global education systems. But the truth was always there. In the 20th and 21st centuries, researchers began rediscovering the vast collections. Experts estimate that between 300,000 and 700,000 manuscripts still exist today. And in 2012, when armed extremists threatened Timbuktu, local librarians and families risked their lives to smuggle thousands of manuscripts to safety. Quiet acts of courage, quiet acts of resistance, because they understood what those fragile pages represented. Identity, memory, proof. The story of Timbuktu is not about competition between continents. It is about correction. It is about restoring balance to the historical narrative. Africa debated philosophy. Africa calculated astronomy. Africa preserved law. Africa documented its own empires and intellectual traditions. This was not merely oral culture. It was written scholarship. Imagine a desert city illuminated by candlelight, where scholars copied manuscripts late into the night. Imagine courtyards filled with debate about ethics, science, and theology. Imagine caravans arriving not just with gold, but with books wrapped carefully in cloth. This was real. This was Africa. And today, those manuscripts still whisper a powerful truth. Civilization is not owned by one continent. Intelligence is not confined to one culture. Scholarship is not the invention of one region. When Europe was in the Dark Ages, Africa was writing books. The sands of Timbuktu do not conceal ignorance. They conceal brilliance. The libraries were never truly lost. They were protected. And they stand as a reminder that Africa was not waiting to be educated. It was already teaching.